You got to wait for a gapper.
That is fair. Down the right field line. Giambi on his way to third. And they're going to wave him around. The throw misses a cutoff man. Shot into the plate. Out of the plate. Derek Jeter with one of the most unbelievable plays you will ever see by a shortstop.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I'm Thom Brennaman. We're here every single day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. You can join us on YouTube at Chatterbox Sports or on Facebook/Chatterbox Sports. Please subscribe, hit the notification switch, let you know when all our clips come out from all our great interviews. Today, no different. On social media, we can be found on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Thom Brennaman TV. That's Thom Brennaman TV, and we are available and understand our uploads and downloads on a podcast form. You just go to Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman, Off the Bench with Thom Brennaman, and you'll find it in podcast form. You don't have to see it. You can just listen to it. So here we go. The American League has a new single-season home run king. Yankee star Aaron Judge hit his 62nd home run of the season last night. That was on the road against the Texas Rangers, breaking the American League record he shared with Roger Maris. He took Jesus Tinoco deep in his first at-bat in Game 2 of a doubleheader yesterday, and Judge has been the case the entire time. The young man has handled himself so beautifully, so humbled after the game, saying having his name mentioned with guys like Roger Maris and Babe Ruth was just incredible. Interesting to note, there was not a single mention of Barry Bonds. He owns the single-season home run record with 73 home runs, a record, of course, that many believe was enhanced by PEDs. So he gets his 62nd home run, and the Reds, on the same day, get their 62nd win of the year. It came in walk-off fashion last night against the Chicago Cubs, thus avoiding a 100th loss of the season. The final game of the 2022 campaign is today at Great American Ballpark. It's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Major League Baseball set this whole thing up, you may remember, a couple of years ago, where every game, the final day of the season, starts at the exact same time in case there were playoff implications. In this case, there are not. On the basketball front, what a day for Wes Miller and the UC Bearcats. Four-star recruit Jizzle James made it official by committing to the Bearcats yesterday in their 2023 class. He is the 10th-ranked point guard in the country. He is also the son of former NFL star Edgerrin James. The Orlando native joins TAV star Rayvon Griffith, who announced his intention to play for the Bearcats in the month of May. Football news. The Bengals get back to work today, preparing for Sunday night's clash with the Ravens in Baltimore. Our big interview today is Cris Collinsworth. He will be calling the game for NBC Sports. That's coming up at about 10:30, so you don't want to miss that. Fellas, good morning. Casey McAllister, Brandon Seho, how we doing today?
Doing good.
We're good.
Doing good.
Ready to go.
Guys all right?
Yeah. I got my monster like normal. We're good.
Got a good night's rest?
Yeah. Excited for Chris to come on.
Very excited for Chris to come on.
Is he going to slide in the frame?
That's a good question. He brought it back, I understand, last week.
Yeah, he has to. I think he has to slide in the frame on off the bench.
We may have to ask him if he can do that, because I saw where he made the point that Mike Tirico does the opening in a little bit different way.
Yeah.
than Al Michaels used to do it by himself, and then Chris would slide in there. I think they're opening most of the time on a 2-shot.
Right.
But the reason they started on a single shot of Mike Tirico last week was so he could address the whole Hurricane Ian repercussions of playing that game in Tampa. And, of course, Chris is a native Floridian, although he may as well be a Cincinnati guy. He's been here going back to his playing career when he came out of the University of Florida. We'll talk to him about that coming to Cincinnati. And we'll talk to him about his career as a player all the way through the 2 Super Bowl appearances, both against Joe Montana. We know all about that. We'll talk about the Stanley Wilson situation that night before the Super Bowl. And we will talk to him about the upcoming Bengals v. Ravens game, Sunday night from Baltimore. But first things first, is Marty Brennaman ready to go?
I think he is.
He is always early. You can always count on that. The Hall of Famer from his palatial estate somewhere out in Anderson Township. We're going to leave that point and that location unknown to the masses, or else it might look like a Bengals tailgate over there at your house if people, Dad, knew where you lived.
I would sincerely doubt that. It would never bother me if somebody had. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Yeah, no, it would not be that way. Not at all. No. I'm very reclusive. You have a hard time understanding that. But, I fly under the radar. I'm just good old Marty when I go into Kroger store 4 or 5 times a week. All that other stuff's behind me now. You understand me?
Well, I'm not so sure I'm buying that, but if you're selling it, I'll consider buying it because you're my dad, and most of the stuff you're selling, Brandon Sejo walks in here every day talking about Laura's lean. It makes me sick after a while.
Jerky.
Well, I don't know why it would make you sick. Brandon is just a guy who has a tremendous feel for the good things in life, and Laura's lean beef is one of those things, and God bless him for feeling that way.
Yeah, well, most of his combination would be Laura's Lean and Coors Light, unfortunately for him. That's that's his combination of choice most of the time, I'm afraid.
Well, one goes with the other. Hamburgers, steaks, Coors Light. What can I tell you?
See, this is the perfect combination. This is why I love you, Marty. You're on my side with this. Tom dogs me every day I come in here talking about Coors Light and Laura's Lean.
Well, you don't need to take all that stuff, Brandon, and nor do you, Casey. Neither one, because as I made a comment 2 weeks ago, when the end of the day comes, whether it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever, you two guys are the guys that are the power behind the throne.
What about
That's
that?
it.
What about that stuff on his face still? You like that?
Thank God you brought that up. Amanda and I had a discussion about that the other day when she asked me, is Tom growing a goatee? And I said, I don't know. I haven't really paid any attention. So I looked at a picture. Can you give me a reasonably intelligent reason for why you are junking your face up like that?
Trust me when I tell you, I want nothing to do with this. But I gave my word to our buddy Zim Houday when the Bengals started 0-2. I said, look, I will not shave till they lose. I went through last weekend with Luke, your grandson, my son, homecoming pictures. I've got this mess all over my face. I told Zim, look, I said, I will keep it until the game is over this Sunday night against the Ravens, and then it's gone. I don't like it. I want nothing to do with it. And it will be over Sunday night, win or lose. End of story.
Well,
he calls it savage mode, is what he calls it.
He calls it what?
Savage mode. He has that on a lot of the merchandise that Zim Houday sells, is getting into savage mode for the Bengals, and that's what I've done.
So no matter what happens now, come Sunday, you're going to cut it off. Is that correct?
Over. I'm not going to go until they lose, that kind of thing. It's just not going to happen because I can't stand it anymore. And as I've said, if they can't beat the New Orleans Saints and then the Atlanta Falcons without me having shaved, then they got bigger problems than worrying about Thom Brennaman being in savage mode.
That makes sense to me because of the level of competition they're going to be facing. I could not agree with you more.
Okay. All right. Aaron Judge, he hits number 62 last night. Do you consider that to be the single-season Major League Baseball home run record?
Yes. Sure do. Sure do. Unlike some other people that have been asked that question and they answered, no, I don't, but that they don't go into who they recognize in that position. I certainly do. I think he's done it the right way. I think he's done it without any medicinal help, for want of a better term. And so as far as I'm concerned, Aaron Judge is a single-season home run leader, and Henry Aaron is the all-time home run leader.
Look, at the end of the day, I was thinking about this yesterday and again today, knowing that there was a chance Judge would hit number 62 in a doubleheader, and he did in his first at-bat in the second game last night down in Arlington, Texas.
Right.
Mark McGwire, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Mark McGwire is the only one of that group, and that group being Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, where it's
Correct.
actually been, or he admitted, not proven. McGwire came out and admitted to taking performance-enhancing drugs. To my knowledge, it has never been proven, certainly suspected, but never been proven that Barry Bonds did use PEDs. I'm not saying he did or he didn't. I don't know.
Right.
But as far as you know, has that ever been proven? And if it hasn't been proven, then why isn't he the guy for the home run record?
Well, I don't think it's ever been proven. I think you're right there. I mean, I give him his day in court in that respect, but all signs obviously point to it. Now, that's a weak argument if you were in a court of law and you were trying to argue the case for the fact that you surmise that Barry Bonds took performance-enhancing drugs. However, I think if you look at his career and how he never even approached those lofty home run standards until a certain point in time in the decade of the 90s, you look at the way he looked once he was allegedly on PEDs, and now look at him the way he looks today, which is a dead giveaway, or certainly something that makes a person pause and think that guy at one time did performance-enhancing drugs. So from my perspective, he is guilty as hell as far as I'm concerned. I think and at the end of the day, and I shouldn't say this because I criticize people who do, as far as Hall of Fame candidacy, and a lot of people they allow their personal likes or dislikes to enter into a situation. A lot of people would not give Barry Bonds air in a jug if he were dying, because when he was a player, he was a gold-plated jerk. And I was one of those people. So I choose, for my own personal feelings, and not because I did not like the guy personally, because I saw what a jerk he was and heard what other people said he was. I choose to believe that he did take performance-enhancing drugs, and I choose to believe that Aaron Judge didn't.
All right, I want to ask you about the playoffs. They're all set now. We'll stay away from the American League. I know there are a lot of people that follow both leagues, and that's great, but we're going to focus in on the National League. It's all set. The number one seed overall in the National League, the Dodgers. Yeah. As of last night, the number 2 seed, it's official now, Atlanta, again, National League Eastern Division champions. So both of those teams sit out while they play a series that starts Philadelphia at St. Louis. St. Louis has had an unbelievable year. I feel like the Cardinals have really gone under the radar, if there is such a thing, for a St. Louis Cardinals team. They get a lot of pub. But they have some guys individually who have had phenomenal years in that lineup. But Philadelphia, they had Joe Girardi, who you and I like very much. Think he's an excellent manager. They fire him. They get the whole thing turned around. Now Philly's in for the first time in 11 years. Who do you like in that series?
To be honest with you, I've got to pick the Cardinals. And I agree with you about it's a different type of St. Louis club from the ones that we've known about in past years. their corner infielders have been incredible, and Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. And they've got a couple of young outfielders that have had big seasons offensively, of course, led by the all-time leader in my book, and Yadier Molina. I just think their pitching is better than Philadelphia's. Aaron Nola's had a big year for the Phillies in their rotation, but at the same time, the Phillies have been a long time in getting back there. The Cardinals are old hat. I don't know whether that means anything or not. Sometimes I think it does. Other times I don't think it does. But if I had to pick one over the other, I would pick St. Louis, and not to take anything away from Philadelphia. I think the job that Rob Thompson has done when he stepped in to take over that managerial job in Philadelphia when they fired Joe Girardi. And I know that was a tough thing for him because he and Joe have been very, very close over a lot of years. He was his bench coach. Now he has to assume the managerial job and watch his pal be dismissed. I think he was as strong a candidate for manager of the year in the National League, and who knows, he may still win it. We don't know yet. But I still think St. Louis has the edge in that series. I don't hear you now.
Eric, you got me?
Yeah, I got you. Go ahead.
Okay. I think by far, tell me if you agree or disagree, I think the most intriguing opening round matchup is the other wild card matchup in the National League, that being the San Diego Padres, and we know all the things that they have done going back to the winter, spending just a pile of money, and it's paid off. They didn't win the division, but they're in the playoffs, and taking on a New York Mets team that all of a sudden DeGrom is back, throwing the ball well. Scherzer appears to be healthy. With him, it seems, kind of touch and go sometimes. How do you look at that series? I think that has a chance to be a phenomenal series.
I don't know about that. I think if the New York Met rotation is on top of its game, and as you and I talked this morning, there are no unknown injuries to any of the rotation pitchers that Buck will run out there when it begins. I think, quite honestly, I believe that the Mets can make quick work of the San Diego Padres. I really do.
Why?
Now that has to do with, as you said a moment ago, the assumption that the big two, DeGrom and Scherzer, are on top of their game. Anything less than that, then I'd have to back off and think about it. I just think the Mets will rise to the occasion and win that series and do it fairly quickly.
So if your predictions hold true and St. Louis wins their series, the Cardinals would then take on the top seed, the Dodgers. And I know we can get into this once it happens. And you would have the Mets and the Braves. What a series that would be.
That would be incredible.
Duked it out the entire year in that National League East. Do you think the Dodgers are an automatic into the World Series team out of the National League, or can somebody chop them down?
Well, I tell you, Tom, you look at their roster, and I've said it all year long, there are few, if any, automatic outs in their batting order. The Dave Roberts runs out there day after day. They've got they've got a solid bullpen. I take that back. They've got a solid pitching staff. I guess you could mount some questions about their bullpen in certain areas. But I'd have a hard time picking against the Dodgers. I really would. I just think that they are too talented. They're too experienced. I'm a big Dave Roberts fan. I would have a hard time picking against them, and that's not to say that somebody could rise up and have a great run and defeat them. The thing, let me digress for a moment. There's no team, and we're talking about the National League today, that immediately comes to mind that is on an incredible roll. I've been a firm believer in the past that a team might catch fire in the last 2 weeks of the regular season, and they run off. Off 8 wins and 10 games, And now they've got an incredible amount of momentum. I know the Cardinals did it way back early in this century when I think they were a 500 team. When this regular season ended, they caught fire the last week and a half, and then they just rolled through and won the World Series. Anything short. So I don't think anybody has an edge over anybody else in that regard. I just have a hard time picking against the Dodgers. Somebody would have to prove to me. And I think from a pitching perspective, both Atlanta and the Mets have the kind of pitching that if they get on a roll once the postseason begins and they carry on through, could offer a real challenge against the Dodgers. But from an offensive standpoint, boy, I tell you, if you're pitching against him, there are very few, if any at all, and there are day-to-day 8 players that he pencils into that lineup that you can slack off against.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Before I let you get out of here, today's the season finale for the Cincinnati Reds. They rally in walk-off fashion. We talked about it a minute ago, to win last night, to avoid that 100th loss. Last game of the season, late this afternoon. Are you making your way down there to help them stay away from a 100th loss?
That would be no. I would be not. Will I be watching and or listening? I would say yes, just to see if they can finish the year with a mini run of their own and sweep the Cubs and avoid the second 100-loss season in the history of the franchise. But no, I won't be going down there today, but I will be paying attention to the way that game turns out. I think it starts at 4:10 or something like that. Yeah.
I tell you, it's been fun watching Lodolo and Green here down the stretch. Both of them, boy, they look like potentially outstanding anchors for a very good starting rotation. I don't know what the rest of the team's going to look like. I don't know if they know what the rest of the team is going to look like. But with those two guys and Ashcraft, who will start today, that's a pretty solid nucleus, or at least a foundation of young pitchers if you can keep them healthy.
No question about that. I think if there's one highlight of a dismal season, it's the fact that these kids have come up and they have progressed and they have matured start by start to the point where if they can stay healthy next year and in the years to come, that's a heck of an anchor for what will be a very young and talented rotation. Aside from that, they've got a lot of work to do. Offensively, it is not a good team. They have to figure out a way to generate more offense, and I know they don't want to spend a lot of money. I don't know how you can do one and not the other, because I don't see where this group of players is all of a sudden going to blossom into an offensive juggernaut. I don't see that happening. So they've got a lot of work to do, but they can sure hang their cap on the fact that Green and Lodolo and Ashcraft, and I think some other kids that are going to be coming along. They still got to find out about Connor Overton and whether or not he can stay healthy. And if he does stay healthy, can he pitch the way he pitched early in the season?
Yeah.
If he can, that would be 4 right there. So, yeah, I think you always look for bright spots, and I think the single bright spot has been their young pitching.
All right. Well, Dad, go have a great day and enjoy the sunshine, and we will catch up again next week.
Thom, I look forward to it, and be sure you take care of those 2 young guys that are sitting behind this camera, because they are the 2 guys that make you what you are right now as far as the success of this program.
Most days I feel that way. There are other times I'm not so sure.
Thanks, Marty.
We have our good days and bad days.
Yes, we do. That is for damn sure. All right.
All
Dad,
right,
have
pal.
a good day. See you later.
Thank you.
Great
You
to
too.
have the Hall of Famer Marty Brennaman with us. Red season finale today. That's coming up a little bit after 4 o'clock today, sitting on 99 losses. All right, Wednesday, every week we call it the big interview, and this one is a big one. Big one. Cris Collinsworth, former Bengals star receiver. And, boy, you forget what a great player he was. I was saying that to my wife and son last night getting ready for this interview. I'm like, you forget what an outstanding player he was. He will join us, and we'll also talk about the game he's calling Sunday night, the Bengals and the Ravens. The big interview around the corner on Off the Bench, presented by UDF, is coming right up.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, Turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time. And if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Swinney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Swinney, the original used car superstore.
The time is now. Football season is back here in the Queen City, and Week 1, St. X versus Dakota West. DJ Train here with Chatterbox. It's about to go down. It's our kickoff of our official tour. Every Friday night you'll see us. Let's go. It's on 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's go. Man, I'm telling you, this game is going to come down to the first guy that says I've had enough. That's all it's going to take. One guy to say, you know what, I've had enough.
First game, bro?
My first one. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better first one because Dakota West struggling a lot throughout the first half and beginning of second half, and then
big time.
It's a party. It's a party. It's a party.
I know one thing: ain't nobody does this better than us. Facts.
Yeah, this atmosphere was insane. Show was on point. Everybody had a great time for the first one too, bringing people together. Big shout out to everybody tonight that worked hard from Chatterbox and everywhere else to put on a great show.
This dude's legit.
And he's sweating, so you know he's legit.
Welcome you back to Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Before we get to Cris Collinsworth coming up here in a couple of minutes in the big interview on this Wednesday, you know, I really felt good. And, fellas, I'm curious if you agree. I have to tell you, and we're so grateful for the young man who joined us yesterday. He goes by Ingraven's Vids. He's a Zim Hude-like guy who covers the Baltimore Ravens. He was kind enough on short notice to join us yesterday. And this guy has just completely blown up Twitter with all the people that were so excited about him getting some quote-unquote pub. I mean, you could tell when he was on the air yesterday, he is such a pleasant, humble, hard-working young guy. And I don't know about you guys, but it makes me feel really good when a guy like that gets so much positive response because he's obviously been working hard for a long, long time. Not that this show is going to make him or break him. It's not. But I felt really good about it yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited for him to come back on later on in the season. I know he might be coming down here maybe. I mean, Cincinnati, he said he was from Miami, right?
Yes.
So maybe not, but it would be really cool to have him come down. He seemed like a great guy, level-headed. You know, when you're talking to a division rival, it can kind of get a little heated sometimes, and he just seemed like he was level-headed. That's how I'd put it. That's how I'd phrase it.
Yeah, and we mentioned that there was no trash talk, really, from the Ravens fans. They were just happy to see him on there going back and forth with you about the Bengals and Ravens matchup coming up Sunday night. And I thought that was great, and that's one of the cool things that we talked about behind the scenes was trying to find guys that are genuine, that obviously, you know, have a YouTube following or a social media following where people want to hear what they have to say, and creating that dialogue so it's not just like you always talk about. Not that you always talk about it, but you always talk about this point, not being just X's and O's, having some fun on here for sure.
Well, I mean, it's what you got to do. And I'm going to ask Chris a little bit about that in a minute. When you're sitting there as an analyst and it's a national televised game, every game he does is Sunday night. It's the only game in town, prime time, that kind of thing, on that fine line between too many or too much X's and O's. Chris is really good, you know, telling about some of the stories and the background of some of these players and these young men, where they come from. I mean, you got some guys in every sport, but football maybe more so than some others as it pertains to just American-born players. Baseball, are we good yet with Chris?
No,
not yet. He told me he's getting everything set up right now, so it'll be just a minute. But in football, you know, you've got the rural kids who grow up in farm country. A lot of offensive linemen come out of Wisconsin and Ohio and, you know, on the plains in Texas and, you know, the middle of Florida. Then you get these kids who grow up in Miami, grow up in the cities, in Miami and Dallas, Texas, and Los Angeles and Cincinnati. Lord knows we've had more than our fair share of players that made it to the NFL. And so their backgrounds, I always found to be, when I was doing games every week, very, very interesting to look at where these kids came from, what they're all about. Same holds true in baseball when you're talking about guys from Latin American countries. Chris is saying he didn't get the link.
No, he's joining in right now.
Oh, he's joining in right now? Okay. All right, so he did get it. I just want to make sure that we're all set to go. So you let me know when he's ready, and we'll have Cris Collinsworth. We've got a number of people watching already today, very excited about Cris Collinsworth. One guy went as far as to say, I never had a chance. Thank God Chris retired and got married back in the 80s. He says, because I was taller and much better looking than Cris Collinsworth. I'm not buying that for a minute. But he's going to be joining us any second now. He's kind enough. He's got a lot going on. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with Cris Collinsworth in a moment.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time. And if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
turn when you're in pain. Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
I know one thing. Ain't nobody does this better than us. Facts.
All right, welcome back to Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. It is a pleasure to be joined by Cris Collinsworth, 17-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster at Fox and then later at NBC. You got to go back to Dayton, Ohio, 1959. Hard to believe Cris Collinsworth is 63 years young, to parents Abraham Lincoln Collinsworth and Donetta Collinsworth. Both were educators. Cris, I did not know, first of all, thanks for joining us. I had no idea until getting ready for this interview, and maybe shame on me for not knowing it, that your dad was one of the all-time leading scorers in the history of Kentucky high school basketball. He played at UK for Adolph Rupp and won a national championship there. That was 1 year before you were born. Did you ever get a chance to meet Adolph Rupp?
I did actually. I met Adolph Rupp I went on a recruiting trip out of the great state of Florida, and they brought me to Kentucky. So my recruiting trips were Florida, Florida State, Alabama, Kentucky, because my mom and dad, now my wife, I didn't know that at the time, were all at UK and USC in California. So I came up and they were building Rupp Arena at the time. And so I had already met Happy Chandler, which was amazing, right? So fun. And then I got to meet Adolph Rupp, who took me on a personal tour of Rupp Arena before it was built. And he pointed to a seat on the far side and he said, "That is my seat. That will always be my seat. They will never let anybody sit in my seat," which of course they did, but it was a good story at the time. but he kept, what did he call? He kept calling me, he kept calling me Fritz. And I have no idea why. I got introduced. Somehow Chris became Fritz in his mind. And my dad, who was still scared to death of him, who was with me on the trip, refused to correct him. I refused to correct him. So I went around as Fritz the entire tour. Kind of started liking it a little bit, and that was the way I was introduced.
That's a great story, man. That is an awesome story. You mentioned that your family, even though Kentucky roots, you moved down to Florida. You recruited, and you eventually decided to go to the University of Florida. You went as a quarterback, right? And if I'm not mistaken, in your very first pass attempt, you throw a 99-yard touchdown that first year as a quarterback at Florida. Is that right?
That's pretty much it. I don't know if it was my first pass. Honestly, it may have been. We were playing Rice, and we were winning by like a couple touchdowns, maybe even 3 touchdowns. It's, in the second half. So we get the ball on the 1 yard line, our own 1 yard line. So they throw me in there. And Derek Gaffney, who was the wide receiver, a senior, older guy, comes in, and I'm supposed to roll out and throw him a pass in the flat or a little like out route. And so I go, and he gets in the huddle, and so I call the play, and he goes, take a look at that guy playing cornerback over there. He goes, if he squats at all, I'm just taking off. What am I going to tell him? I'm a freshman, my very first game. I'm like, all right, go on with it. So he goes by this guy, and I just throw it as far as I can. And he runs under it and goes 99 yards, which was cool. It's exciting. It's all that stuff. It didn't dawn on me at the time that 99 yards is as far as you can complete a pass, right? Because it doesn't matter, unlike, say, a kickoff return, where if you're 9 yards deep, it's a 109-yard return. The pass is always from the line of scrimmage. So I throw a 99-yard touchdown pass, which is one of, like, at the time, I don't know how many they have now, at the time, one of like 6 in the history of NCAA football. I'm friggin' in the Hall of Fame. It's the ultimate trivia question as to if nobody could ever name all the people who threw a 99-yard touchdown pass, because they would never put me on that list. And, but yeah, so I mean, you can imagine all the stories out of it, that I threw a screen pass, that I did, but it actually was a good pass, and 99 yards. And that was about the last highlight I had playing quarterback. The next year, Steve Spurrier comes in, and they moved me to wide receiver. We were running the wishbone and all that kind of stuff. I wasn't much of a passer, and it didn't take Spurrier long to figure out we've seen enough.
Well, look, though, you moved to wide receiver. I don't know at the time if you were all that happy about that. Obviously, you were blessed with incredible athleticism. You were a state champion in track. You're one of the fastest guys coming in out of Florida, one of the fastest guys in the country. And you moved to wide receiver. You go on 3 years in a row. You're all SEC. You're an All-American. You become one of the great receivers in the history of Florida. In hindsight, of course, you're glad you made the move from quarterback to wide receiver. At the time, were you happy you made the move?
It was funny, my dad. So I got recruited really by everybody. I really could have gone just about anywhere I wanted to go. And at the time that they made the move, Doug Dickey, who was the head coach, said Spurrier and Lee McGriff were the offensive coordinator and my receivers coach. So they went in and told Doug Dickey they were going to move me. And he said, not going to say anything, but you are going down to visit with Abe Collinsworth and tell him that his son is getting moved to wide receiver. And Lee just told me the story the other night. I saw him in Denver. And so Lee was like, all right. He said, I was scared to death going down there, and I was telling him, and so they had a conversation with my dad, and my dad said, have you talked to Chris about it? And he said, yeah. And he said, what did Chris say? He said, Chris said it's okay with him. He said, well, then it's okay with me. Mm-hmm. And that's about as far as it went. He did call me and say, is this what you want to do? And that everybody wanted to know if I was happy, because a lot of the schools that recruited me wanted me to come play quarterback, because most of the country was still playing sort of option football, mm-hmm. which is what I came out of high school doing. And so I could have gone back to some of the schools, Alabama, Kentucky, SC. I mean, if I had known, I would have been playing receiver from the beginning. I'm not sure I would have gone to Florida because they were a wishbone team. I probably would have. That's where I wanted to go. But it did make for an interesting moment in time where you kind of one of those jumping off points, where it's like, no, I signed up to go to Florida not to play football, so I'm gonna stick with it, and it worked out all right.
It worked out all right because in 1981, you're a second-round pick, 37th overall. Your first season, you set the Bengals rookie record, 67 receptions. You go for over 1,000 yards. You go to the Super Bowl. I mean, is that not hitting the lottery right from the get-go in year one?
It was pretty good until we got to that Super Bowl part. That was a little rough. It's the funniest thing about playing in a Super Bowl is that you just assume you're going to win, right? You've been the best team all year. We were 12-4. We roll right through the playoffs, no problem. Played in the Freeze Bowl game, all these different things. And so, you go into the game and you just assume you're going to keep winning. And to lose that game, it was great. I got to go to the Pro Bowl that year. I got to go to the Super Bowl. But it's like, that is like the most dramatic slamming of the door in your face that you can imagine, right? Mm-hmm. It's just like, what? There's no way. And we came out and we were so terrible in the first half. We were down 20-0 and came back. And I mean, when our offense finally became what it was, which was really explosive, we come back and I caught a long pass after fumbling in the first half, and they get us down, and we eventually end up 3rd and goal on the 1. It's 20-7, but it's early in the third quarter, and we'd already scored the first touchdown. And 3rd down, we catch a pass in the flat, but Charles Alexander didn't get in the end zone, just barely short. Go for it on 4th down. Had a couple of blown assignments on the play, and don't score it. And it just, it's just so brutal. But I remember Forrest Gregg coming in at halftime, and his final words to us was, well, go out and do what you can. You guys couldn't screw it up. I'll use a loosely phrased term. You guys can't screw it up any worse than you did in the first half. Go see what you can do. That was about the extent of his halftime speech. And but it ended up close. We had a shot. We did have a shot.
That was the first of 2 Super Bowls, Chris, you would play in. And both of them, you got to look at Joe Montana. In 19, at the end of the 88 regular season, I remember I was fortunate enough when you and I were doing work together at Channel 5, doing the high school football stuff and all that kind of thing, and you decide that you're going to retire after that Super Bowl. And I had a chance to come down there and interview you, and I've never had a chance since then to ask you this, but as you're standing on the sideline, when the 49ers get the ball back, and I asked Anthony Munoz this question a couple of weeks ago, but his answer was going to be very different than your answer because you had already decided that this was going to be it. You were retiring. Who were you standing next to? What was going through your mind? I would imagine a range of emotions. All the things happening, Super Bowl, chance to win, 49ers got the ball, you're retiring. Do you recall exactly what was going through your mind, who you were with when the 49ers got that ball before that final drive?
Yeah, I do. It was, and just as an FYI, the Bengals may have known I was retiring. I didn't know at that time. I didn't go to training camp next year. So, I got to go out the old-fashioned way. I got cut. So, in some ways I would prefer that. I don't know if I would have ever retired. But, yeah, we were over there, and somebody, I won't tell you who, said to me, we got them now. They haven't moved the ball all day. We got them now. It's over because we had just taken the lead. And so now they're going down, and there was a holding call. So it was 2nd and 20. And now everybody's excited because we feel like, that's a pretty good spot right there. And they hit Jerry Rice against triple coverage. I've talked to Dick LeBeau about it since. He goes, we had 3 guys on him. And a little dig route. He breaks a tackle. He goes for about 40-something yards down the middle of the field. And in a weird way, I actually started cheering for them. I knew they weren't going to keep him out of the end zone. I just knew it. But I was like, at least give us a chance to go the other way, right? Give us a chance to get the ball and go score back on the other end. But they sort of methodically went down from there and scores with like 34 seconds to go. And so then we go out and we've got like not much of a chance, obviously, at the end, but they throw a Hail Mary sort of down the boundary to me. And I am flying as fast as whatever I had left in my legs at that point. And I end up diving for the ball. And I don't even know who it was that hit me, but hit me along the sideline. You want to talk about a little farewell address, man. I mean, I got rocked. It was rocked. And so we go walking off the field, and it was the same feeling again. It's like, what do we have to do to win one of these things? Because the 49ers had played in 5 Super Bowls now, and 3 of them, and 3 of them were complete blowouts at the time. And we had 2 that came right down to the wire with them, but we could never beat Joe Montana. I don't think we ever beat him. They had that one game, if you'll remember, we had a 4-point lead and the ball with 6 seconds to go in the game and lost. And you go, how did you manage to do that? Instead of punting the ball, we're like on our own 20. Instead of punting the ball, Sam made a decision. We're going to pitch it to James Brooks, and he was just going to run around until the clock runs out. They blitz, shoot through there, tackle him immediately in the backfield. 2 seconds left on the clock. They throw a jump ball to Jerry Rice and win the game. And it was literally like, this team has some mystical power over us that they're able to win. But that was the team in my career that just got us every time.
The whole Stanley Wilson thing. I was down there, and after everything starts, and I'm at Channel 5 at the time, and Sam is looking for something to pick the team up. Stanford Jennings' wife had just had their first child, and we had gone over to the hospital to get some video of mom holding their little baby, and then all this stuff is going on with Stanley Wilson. What do you remember most about that whole, couple of hours of time together there for that whole situation?
Mostly just, it was like, what? And I think that one of the hard parts about it, and I actually interviewed Stanley when he was, basically getting ready to go to jail, I think is when it was, for a pregame show one time. And, he had just worked so hard all year to stay off of it. I mean, he clearly had addictive issues that, kept coming to the forefront in his life. But that Super Bowl year, he, every single week he's battling this thing, and we make it all the way through the year. And he was a really significant part of our team. He was sort of that edgy personality, that fullback that, also could catch the ball and make plays out of the backfield. And he was a tremendous energetic force on our team. And then I remember Sam came into the meeting room the night before the Super Bowl, and he goes, about all he got out of his mouth was, we lost Stanley. And everybody's like, what are you talking about? And, Sam could barely get the rest of it out of his mouth. And so there were a lot of emotions at that time. There were a lot of people really mad. There were people that were very sympathetic and knew that his life was going to be different forever at that point. But it was a little stunner the night before. I never believed that had anything to do with winning or losing the Super Bowl, even though it probably changed a little bit of our offense the next day. But yeah, it was hard because everybody liked Stanley. Everybody really liked. He was just one of those guys that, he just was on edge all the time and just tough, hard-minded, gutty player that I just, he was always the guy right at the whistle who was knocking somebody down and just sort of gave a little bit of that attitude to our offense. So it was a tough day.
Kenny Anderson and Boomer Esiason. On the surface, their personalities couldn't be more night and day. In the huddle, did they have more similarities than people might think, or were they night and day in the huddle?
They were night and day, brother. They were night and day. Kenny Anderson would just get in there and call the play. And, and he was so precise with everything that he did. His reads were perfect. His ball was a perfect spiral that if there was a defender in front of you, he would sort of throw it low and away to keep you from taking the hit. And just like one of those artists, playing the quarterback position. Boomer Esiason was more like AC/DC coming in there. It was just everything was loud, everything was obnoxious, everything was sort of dictating everything that was going on. Then he would get to the line of scrimmage. I'll never forget one time we were playing Buffalo, and Boomer gets to the line of scrimmage and he goes, "Hey, Bruce Smith, we're running right over you right now. Anthony Munoz is going to take you and drive you into the end zone. We're running right there." And you see Anthony, he's like waving his hand back at Boomer. Shut up. I got my hands full over here anyway. And so Anthony comes over to the bench and he goes, "Will you talk to your boy, man? He's out of his mind. Bruce Smith is like a raging idiot over there right now, trying to kill everybody." I go, "You're on your own, man. I just want him to throw me a pass. I'm not negotiating for you, too."
That is a great story. I've always wanted to ask you as well. Some people might know. I think most people probably don't know. You were getting your law degree and got your law degree when you were still playing. Why did you feel like you needed to get a law degree, and have you ever wanted to go practice law?
No, I never wanted to practice. The number one thing I learned in law school after 5 years, it took me 5 years on that plan to get out. But the number one thing I learned was that I definitely did not want to be a lawyer. But it was a great education. My wife, my then girlfriend, soon to be fiance and wife, was in law school at the University of Kentucky. And I had been accepted to law school at the University of Florida coming out. And then I made the football team. And so it was like, you're never going to get a chance to do that again. And so I don't know. I'm kind of a competitive idiot. And I see her in law school and doing all that stuff. And I was like, well, I got accepted out of the University of Florida. And she goes, yeah, I know. So I went back and I had to take the SAT again. And I studied for it, took the test, got into UC. And they set up a program for me where I went and God bless him, Mike Brown said, look, you're at the end of your career, watching them install basic coverages and routes, not going to do you any good. He goes, if you can take some morning classes, go ahead and do it. And so I went over and I would show up for these 8 a.m. classes, and I would come back in the middle of some of these meetings. And I know it made some other people crazy. I'm sure it did. But I always give Mike Brown credit for understanding that, there is life after football and you want to get ready for it. And I still think that was one of the great things that happened because it separated me a little bit. When I was coming out, I had no idea I was going to end up in broadcasting. But at least I had some kind of a job to look forward to as I was going out and going to be a lawyer or whatever, but I think some of the broadcasting jobs that came along, they knew that I was in law school. It had kind of become a story, and then we go to the Super Bowl and it becomes a bigger story. So I think it really did help create opportunities for me, even though it was hard. Law school and going, it wasn't going to the 8 a.m. classes that was hard, but it's, you've got 5 hours of homework when you get home from football practice and a 8 to 5 football job, and then you got 5 hours of homework, and then you do it again and again and again. And luckily for me, Steve Kreider was my roommate for a lot of it, and he was going through his doctorate at UC in finance. So he was doing homework. I'm doing homework. Everybody else is watching a movie in the friggin' room. I go, what's the matter with us? So one night I made him shut it down. I go, we are not doing homework tonight. We are not. And I made him watch Fast Times at Ridgemont High with me. And we laughed all night. It was the greatest. That was one of the great nights of my life.
Oh, yeah, one of the great movies of all time, Spicoli.
Yeah, baby.
You go to Fox. You're in a 3-man booth. You're with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. Off you go to NBC, and you've been with Al Michaels for a long time until this year, and Mike Tirico has taken over full time. I'm kind of curious. Can broadcast partners become stale with one another if it goes on too long?
It didn't for me. I love Al and still do. We're still best of friends. I mean, I talk to him all the time. I mean, you just talk to him all the time. So no, I would say the only time that I didn't really like it as much was doing a 3-man booth. That to me was just too hard. There's too many people talking, in my opinion. Now some people can really make it work. We've seen it work on, Monday Night Football. We've seen it work with, on college basketball some. So it's not that it can't work, but you know what it is. It's like you're in constant communication with the producer of the show. And so I see something and Troy Aikman would see something. It was like a game show. We're both hitting the button to talk to the producer to tell him what we're seeing. And then he's got to decide what he's going to put up. Neither one of us really knew. And for me, there's a flow to the game. And I think that there also needs to be space in the game. There needs to be a breath taking.
Yes.
Yep. People don't want to hear wall-to-wall talk. And so, but with that kind of pacing and communication, I just thought it was too hard. So I actually have it in my contract. Like, whatever you guys want me to do, I'm happy to do, but I don't want to do 3-man booth again. I don't think it's the right answer for me. Ultimately everybody likes to be able to weave the story in the way that they want to weave the story. And so I'm sure Troy is loving it. I'm loving it. And that part of it, I think, is better.
You started Pro Football Focus. And I don't know if you would consider, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if you would consider Pro Football Focus. I know you get into a lot of metrics and players and evaluating players and how they do week in and week out, collegiate level, pro level, that kind of thing. I don't know if you would consider it an analytics study of players. Analytics, in my opinion, has ruined baseball. It's been the best thing for the pitcher. It's been the best thing for the batter. It's been the worst thing for the sport. Analytics is becoming more and more a part of football. Has it been good for football?
I think to some extent it's made it a little more exciting. Traditionally, coaches would only kick field goals or would only punt the football away because they didn't want to go into the press conference afterwards like John Harbaugh did this past week.
Yep.
And try and explain why he went for it on 4th and 1, down around the goal line and the tie score and all that. In reality, the math will tell you that even if you kick a field goal there, you're giving the ball back to the other team with plenty of time. So they now have the hammer. They've got a chance. They'll probably start around 25-yard line. Likelihood of being able to go down and kick a field goal very high because you're going to play all 4 downs. You're not going to punt the ball back to them at the end of the game, and likelihood of a touchdown to beat you and you never getting the ball back very high, right? All those things. So it's not just what it does to take the lead in the moment. It's also how much time's left, what's likely to happen, what are the percentage odds, and all that stuff. Now, they decide to go for it and throw an interception. So instead of leaving the ball at the 1 yard line, which gives you a high likelihood of getting it back in great field position and still controlling the game from that situation, they throw an interception, ball out to the 20, and now it's a different set of circumstances. And now the coach has to go in there and explain it. But in today's age, there are mathematicians who can say he made the right decision. It didn't work out. And a lot of times these situations are 51, 49%, so it's very close, which means you're going to be wrong 49 times out of 100. So for a lot of coaches, it's not worth that 49% of risk taking to have to go in front of the media and try and explain it, so they still play the conservative route. Some, like John Harbaugh, are going strictly by the numbers. And their answer is going to be, look, I'm not a mathematician. I don't know what that is. I'm going to go play the numbers. So I think there's this added layer of complexity to the game that I enjoy, that I think is an interesting part of it. But man, it makes everything just a little bit wilder on game day. And from a television standpoint, good by me.
I want to hit a couple more topics before we let you go. I know you got a lot going on. What's the biggest challenge for head coaches who are play callers?
I think keeping up with the situation, because we just Nathaniel Hackett just faced this. He was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. He became the head coach, the play caller. In the first 2 weeks, he makes some mistakes in both games, and having done it at a very low level, like peewee football and high school football, being a play caller, you are so wrapped up in what's the next play and the situation changes so quickly. Like you may decide you're going to go for it you got a 3rd down and 1, and you're going to go for it on 2 downs. And so you go, all right, we're going for it on both downs. Now you lose 3 yards on 3rd down and 3. Now what do you do? Well, your brain isn't thinking about that, right? So you need somebody in the box who's going to go down and go, now we should kick the field goal, or now we should punt. And all of that stuff now is basically an algorithm that you just plug in the situation. Unfortunately, the NFL teams don't have access to computers during the game. They cannot use technology. So they all got this massive sheet of paper and book that they have to flip through to find all these situations. Now, most of them kind of know it off the top of their head, but it is, and you have basically 5 seconds to make that decision after the prior play, because you either got to run the field goal team on. We saw Tom Brady take a delay game penalty when they decided to go for 2 at the end of the game against Green Bay the other day. So, I mean, it is like a huge corporation that has to make decisions in 5 seconds, and it's not easy to do. And when they go wrong, the rest of us have all week to beat them up and tell them what idiots they are.
Yep.
And that's kind of part of what the fun of it is too. I can remember Terry Bradshaw saying one time how much he hated the college football playoff system. I said, why? And he said, because you don't get to argue anymore, Chris. That's what's fun about the whole thing. You got to argue about it. He goes, because there are 4 different teams that think they're the number 1 team in the country as soon as they play those bowls. So he would go on and on and on about, this. And the older I've gotten, the more I go, he's kind of right. Do we always have to have that one team at the end of the playoffs? It really works for the NFL, obviously, or professional sports. But I think in college sports, I don't know. I think there was a point how much fun bowl season was, because then you had to adjust. Well, what does that mean for my team? And I thought it was kind of fun too. I think he makes a legit point.
Last thing I want to ask you about before you get out of here. Well, last 2 things. Bengals and Ravens. You got the game this weekend in Baltimore. Everybody who watches this show knows what's going on with both teams. You're headed to the Bengals practice today. When you start to get prepared, as you've been all week long for these two teams, give us something that you're looking at and you're saying, man, that's something I really want to watch to see if it happens or doesn't happen once they kick off on Sunday night.
Yeah, I think that probably the most interesting part of it is going to be watching the Bengals offensive line going against the Ravens defensive line. I don't think the Bengals have been getting better in their pass protection, and I think the Bengals offense has changed from that opening day game against Pittsburgh where, Joe Burrow was just getting shellacked, and getting hit a lot. We saw a lot more of the quick throws. We saw a lot more of the little stick routes, the little 5-yard routes, and guys making catches and runs, Hayden Hurst and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and those Tyler Boyd. Just get the ball in their hand and let them try and go make some plays against the Ravens defense. And the Ravens defense is a little bit in between as well. They've had some injuries, and Jason Pierre-Paul comes in, who was released by Tampa Bay last year. Probably their best pass rusher now is a guy named Odafe Owe. But they're not a natural pass rushing team, at least with just the front four. So they'll send Chuck Clark out of the secondary. They'll send Patrick Queen out of the secondary. They'll do a lot of stuff. So, how quickly, and a lot of people are trying to go after the rookie left guard, as Cordell Volson, and with a lot of stunts and just make his life complex. And I think we'll see Baltimore do some of that as well. So I think how well the Bengals can protect Joe Burrow and how well the Ravens can create pressure on the other side, I think is a really, really interesting thing. But the Bengals had great success against this team last year, but a new defensive coordinator now and Mike McDonald. So we'll see exactly, what that means taking over for Wink Martindale too.
You and your wife, Holly, very proud of all your kids, Austin, Katie, Ashley. But now your son, Jack, he's had a chance to get on NBC doing a lot of the halftime stuff and that kind of thing. Now he's doing play-by-play, did it with the USFL in the spring, and now with Notre Dame football, a gig, by the way, that you used to have many, many moons ago. How cool is that?
Pretty cool. It really is. And the amazing thing about it is that at one time, I don't even know if I ever told you this, but at one time they wanted me to be the play-by-play guy with John Madden.
I know.
And so I went to the stadium and I did probably 5 or 6 games, and then they finally recorded one. And so I was like, all right. So I turned this tape on. And Tom, I'm not kidding you. 45 seconds into it, I went, I just screamed, turned it off. I go, I am the worst play-by-play. They literally flew everybody on like a 747, this NBC jet, to where John Madden's studios were. And we announced a playoff game together. And I mean, it's just, you guys see the game one way, right? And as an analyst, the difference is, as an analyst, like I never watch the ball. I don't watch the ball. You guys watch the ball. I don't watch the ball. It's really hard, I've discovered, to do play-by-play without watching the ball. So now I've got to kind of flip everything in my mind to what I'm doing. And I literally had no idea. It was so awful. And so after this thing's over, because I'd put a lot of work into it, and Dick Ebersol was the one pushing me to do it. And Dick Ebersol came out and he was like, that was good. That was good. One of those like, that's a pretty baby, one of those things. That was good. And he said, he goes, and the job's yours if you want it. And I said, okay. And he said, but I do have an opportunity to get Al Michaels. And I just started laughing. I was like, what are you thinking about? I go hire Al. Are you crazy? I have no idea what I'm doing with this thing here. And you can sort of see John Madden over in the corner smiling and kind of nodding his head. But yeah, I would have never had any appreciation for it until I tried it. And now when I watch you guys do it and when I see Jack do it, I mean, they asked Jack to start doing this like a year ago. And because they just were looking for, fully developed broadcasters. And so he did it, and then he did the USFL this year, and he's done some Notre Dame, and really, it's been amazing for a guy. And he studies everybody. He studies Tirico. He studied you when he was growing up around here. He studies Al, and so he just kept going to YouTube and listening to guys, and he kind of came up with this little bit of a minimalist approach and how he wanted to do it, and he's surviving, and they'll be in prime time this weekend doing the Notre Dame BYU game from Las Vegas. So hope he comes back alive. That'd be good.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that. Hell, I wonder if I'd come back alive at 59 years young now. I'm not so sure anymore if I was still doing those games. Chris, can't thank you enough for the time. I know you got a lot going on, and good luck this weekend. And we'll catch up with you sometime down the road. Godspeed ahead, my friend.
Thank you, Tom. Great talking to you.
All right, Cris Collinsworth. Great to have him with us today. Guy's on his game. That was a great story about that play. But I knew he had a chance, and he had told me about that. I did not know the rest of that story. I mean, can you imagine? You're sitting there. This is Cris Collinsworth, and, they want you to do this play-by-play thing, and then all of a sudden Dick Ebersol, who, that's a guy I'd love to get on the show, is Dick Ebersol. Because he is one of the most fascinating people. He might be the most single fascinating person in the history of sports television. Saturday Night Live, takes over NBC Sports, builds this juggernaut up there. But anyway, I mean, can you imagine sitting in a room and Dick Ebersol's there and John Madden's there, and here you are in Chris's seat, and you're just trying to figure this whole play-by-play thing out, and they're like, well, the job's yours, but, we could hire Al Michaels. That'd be one thing if Chris didn't have a job. He'd say, well, then I wouldn't hire Al Michaels, I'd hire me. But Chris knew he had a job. That's a great story. You heard the stuff about this weekend. And Casey, you and I and Brandon will talk about this here in a second after a break, about this game. And this is what we heard a lot yesterday when we checked in with Engravens. Vids is about this Baltimore defense. They're nicked up. They don't rush the passer well. This could be a good game for the Bengals. We thank Chris. We're back with more on Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers in just a moment.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
The time is now. Football season is back here in the Queen City, and Week 1, St. X versus Lakota West. DJ Train here with Chatterbox. It's about to go down. It's our kickoff of our official tour. Every Friday night you'll see us. Let's go.
It's on 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's go.
Man, I'm telling you, this game is going to come down to the first guy that says I'm heading up. That's all it's going to say. One guy to say, you know what, I'm heading up. My first one. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better first one because Dakota West struggling a lot throughout the first half and beginning of second half, and then
Big time.
it's a party, it's a party, it's a party.
I know one thing. Ain't nobody does this better than us. Facts.
Yeah, this atmosphere was insane. Show was on point. Everybody had a great time for the first one, too. Bringing people together. Big shout out to everybody tonight that worked hard from Chatterbox and everywhere else to put on a great show.
This dude's legit.
And he's sweating, so you know he's legit.
Well, we're back on Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. And our apologies, by the way, for no video with Cris Collinsworth there. Apparently, we just couldn't get it hooked up. But it was great to have him on here. Had a lot of interesting things to say about his career. I'm not surprised at all that he did not like the three-man booth. And for those of you that don't remember, that was a big deal for Fox. This was actually after Pat Summerall and John Madden had left Fox. And Fox had to make a decision about their number one team. So they go with Joe Buck, Troy Aikman, Cris Collinsworth. And I've done a lot of games with Troy through the years, filling in when Joe was doing the baseball playoffs and the World Series. And Troy would tell you the same thing that Cris just told you, that a three-man booth is really tough. I worked in one for a long time on radio, which is even harder than television because you got to explain every single thing going on. I've worked in them in football on television. They're hard because as a play-by-play guy, you want to make sure both guys are getting in, equal time if there is such a thing. And then you have two guys that are looking at the game from very, very different perspectives. And it was a great experience for both of them, but both would tell you, and you heard it from Cris, Troy would tell you the same, they prefer just being the lone analyst in the booth, and it's gone on for bigger and better and brighter things for both Troy and Cris. So, fellas, I mean, he hit the nail on the head there, right? I mean, we've started this season talking about the Bengals' offensive line, right? And the first two games, they give up 13 sacks. They've given up 3 sacks total in the last 2 games. And Brian Billick, he did the scales of justice for us, and this isn't brain surgery. Sacks go up, production goes down. Sacks come down, production goes up. I still don't think the Bengals offense looks very good. I said it during the game the other night, and I was there. It's painful to watch at times. Most of the time, they have been very painful to watch. Now, look, what else is Joe Burrow going to say? He came out and said, the offensive line, it's the best it's been, all year. Well, we made the note on this program. The judging offensive line play involves, yes, protecting the quarterback, which they did a nice job against Miami the other night. Not a big pass rushing team, nor were the Jets. And apparently, neither is Baltimore. But the other part of being a good offensive line is being able to run block. And they have been brutal in that category. Now, can that change after the meeting this week? Joe Mixon huddles everybody up together, offensive line, offensive staff. We shall see. But I'm still not a buyer. I'm not a seller by any means because I think of what potentially they could be with all the weapons. Okay? I'm a big Burrow guy. Love the receivers. Love the tight end. I think he's been an excellent addition, and I love the passion and fire, and he's going to be really fired up for Sunday night going back to Baltimore. Former number 1 pick there, Hayden Hurst. But, guys, I'm not buying yet.
Yeah, I mean, on my way up here today, I was listening to Cincinnati Bengals Talk, their show with Joe Goodberry. And he's kind of breaking down the offense last week, and I hadn't had a chance to really talk to you guys about it and to show you because there's actual evidence of this. But there's a potential reason why the run game has been miserable. And it's because Joe Mixon's posture signals to the defense whether it's a run or if it's a
like
pass.
Tipping pitches.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he will hunch down, get real low when he's getting ready to get the handoff. And he'll stand up real tall and wide when he's getting ready to pass block. And so, I mean, there's some extensive evidence of that. And I'll bring it up and show the numbers on that maybe tomorrow or something like that.
Okay.
So I think last week, though, when Joe had that meeting, it got better because he wasn't telegraphing it as much. And they kind of used it to – I don't know if this is something on the Bengals that they're telling him to do, but on the touchdown to Hayden Hurst, he's standing up as wide as he possibly can be. Or no, excuse me. He's hunched down as
like he's going to run.
Like he's going to run it. And he goes in there, and 4 defensive guys come crashing down on him. Like they just knew that he was going to get the ball. So maybe it's a Bengals telling Joe to do that so we can make that play work down on the red zone.
A decoy. He's running a decoy.
Yeah.
I'm watching Joe Goodberry's breakdown of tape right now on the Cincinnati Bengals Talk YouTube channel, and you can see it does open. I mean, this is the only play I've watched, but it does open it up when Mixon does do that. So
yeah. So I don't know if maybe that's why we struggled so much. That's kind of new developing, at least for us in this space.
Yeah.
And if it is true and we start to see better production now that it's kind of known and that they're using it to their advantage, maybe it won't be so bad. The Ravens defense is miserable. They just are to me.
Well, now wait a minute now. Now, I mean, hold on.
Yeah.
I haven't watched them play every play of their first 4 games. But here's what I do know. That if you take away 1 quarter of football in their 2 losses, they had held the Miami Dolphins to 14 points going into the 4th quarter. Total collapse, no doubt about it. They're ahead 35-14. They lose a game. They blow it. Dude, they allowed 23 points to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
I mean,
the Buffalo Bills that can't run the football.
Well, look, that's neither here nor there, but I think we all agree that after watching them the first 2 weeks of the season, we said, are they going to have a game this year where they don't score 30 or more? Well, until the last second of the game, they had 20 points in the game, the Buffalo Bills. The Ravens defense can't be that bad. They're not giving up 35 and 40 every time out or 25-30 every time out. They had one bad quarter of play, it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm being a little bit harsh by saying they're miserable. They are just not a very good matchup against the Bengals. Their best skill position players in the secondary get torched by our guys. And that's just, you just look at last year, and that's just how it is. They're just better. And so, because they have such trouble rushing the passer, like they haven't in previous years, I mean, it's going to be even harder for those guys to cover T, Chase, Boyd, Hurst, who we didn't have last year, who I think is a bit better than Uzama in terms of the passing attack.
I agree with that.
And so, to me, I feel like we match up so well against their weaknesses. We stop the run really well, just flipping it to the other side. We stop the run. Last year, we were able to bottle up Lamar. We limit the big plays. We do really well at creating big plays on offense, at least from last year. This year, we're starting to get our groove back a little bit. And the last thing, too, is I don't believe that the Ravens are a cover 2 defense. And if you are not going into this year planning to play cover 2 against this team, it's going to be a long day for you.
Well, I hope you're right. Brandon, thoughts on that?
I think the Ravens obviously were an injury-plagued team last year.
No doubt. We're the most injured team in the NFL.
That played into it to some extent, but, I mean, what they did in both games against the Ravens last year was incredible. That first game in Baltimore, I mean, it wasn't as crazy as the Chiefs' run after catch that Jamar Chase had, but that game in Baltimore was the tone setter, and they had the NFL mic'd up, NFL Network mic'd up, and they had Burrow on the sideline saying, we can win this division. When they're sitting there up 2-3 touchdowns, he's looking around, yeah, we can win this division. So that was kind of the tone setter game for Burrow and the rest of the team last year. I think it can be sort of the same this year when you have the ups and downs of through 4 games, losing the first 2, bouncing back for 2 more. I mean, I think it's possible this team gets on a roll and can win 5 or 6 in a row, and then you keep that beard too.
Well, I mean, you take a look, right? And that's why this game, and I'm with you 1,000% on that, because if you look at this game, if they can find a way to win the game on Sunday night in Baltimore, you then have at the Saints. Now, New Orleans is a tough place to play, and they're not a terrible team. They're really not.
It's going to be a 50-50 crowd, though, in New Orleans with Joe.
I don't think so.
The Saints. The Saints didn't want that. The Saints wanted that game to be the London game because they were worried about so many Bengals and LSU fans rooting for Burrow and Chase.
Fair point there. But they go to New Orleans, then they come home to Atlanta. Then they go to the Browns on Halloween. Night game. I'm assuming that's Monday Night Football. Is that what that is?
The Browns? No, that's
It's got to be. It's not going to be another Sunday night game. So that would be a Monday night game is my guess.
Let's see.
Is October the 31st a Monday?
Well, it's Halloween. You got your costume picked out?
I'll get it picked out. Yeah, that's a Monday night. And then they play the Panthers here at home. And then then they go to Pittsburgh for a Sunday night extravaganza. I have a feeling NBC is going to pull the plug on that game if they're able to in November. I don't know if maybe they can't start doing that until December. But Pittsburgh stinks. So the Bengals could get on they've already won 2. If they win this week, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They could go on a legitimate 8-game win streak.
Yeah.
Cleveland's not going to be easy. And none of the games are easy in the NFL. We see it all the time. And we saw Kansas City, who just blasted Tampa Bay the other night. And, a week ago, they go into Indianapolis and get beat. Which, by the way, it sparked something I said here on the show a couple of weeks ago. That AFC South, there is no doubt about it, it runs still right through Nashville, Tennessee. They're the best coach team in the division. They've got the best running back in the division. they've got the best head coach in the division. They may not get to the Super Bowl. They've already had a couple of big injuries, but the Tennessee Titans are still the best team in that division. Agree or disagree? Who's better than them? Jacksonville? No. Playing well. Indy? No.
They beat the Chiefs.
They beat the Chiefs. But I'm not considering the Colts in that conversation. I would just say don't count out the Jags yet. They played decently. They played decent.
You sound like my son.
Hang on. They played decent against the Eagles. They put up a pretty good fight. They're not ready for some big push. I'm not saying that, but I do think that the Jags are better than the Colts and the Texans. And I mean, they're 2-2 right now. I mean, they unfairly played the Eagles, who we kind of have favored going into the Super Bowl. But
well, why not? They're undefeated.
Right. But, I mean, I think if they played anyone else, that we could be talking about a 3-1 team here. And they're able to rush. They have a really good pass rush with that Georgia kid, Walker, I think, and Josh Allen. Those two dynamic guys, really good. We already know what Trevor Lawrence is capable of doing from college. His offense is kind of getting in a groove. I really like Doug Peterson.
I really do. I do too.
That's why I'm saying I think it's going to be between those two when it comes down to it. It's not the Colts are. I'm worried about them, and they just lost Jonathan Taylor, I'm pretty sure, for a significant amount of time. And Texans are still the Texans, unfortunately. So I really think Jags have a chance to make a push.
All right.
I mean, my Lions take looks really bad because they can't stop nobody, but man, I mean, they're one of the best offenses in the league. And by the way, I did some research here. Baltimore is the 30th defense in yards allowed per game.
Okay.
That is, like I said, miserable. We should.
I would bet most of that. Because it's such a small sample size. I would bet most of that came in that fourth quarter alone to Miami.
I mean, 30th though?
Listen, the numbers don't lie. I agree. All I'm saying is that if you took away that fourth quarter, they would, and I know you can't, okay? I know. They'd be 3-1, and their only loss would be to the Buffalo Bills on a last-second field goal, a team they held until that final kick. And let's be honest about it. If John Harbaugh kicks a field goal there, we might talk about the Ravens being 4-0. Woulda, coulda, shoulda, I get it all. But you can make a legitimate argument that right now that team could be 4-0, even with all the problems they have and all the injuries, especially, that they have.
What do you think the key is to beating them then? What are your
I think
keys?
you got to be able look, I've always said, and I know that you get people that argue this, and I've sat in rooms with the Brian Billocks of the world and some of these offensive guys and talking about, football now has moved to total passing game and all this kind of thing. Look, if you can't run the ball and your team becomes completely dependent upon one phase of the game and only one phase of the game, it whittles down the playbook of the opposing defense on how to stop you. Okay? So if you can at least give them something to think about, right? And those big plays are great. The one that all of a sudden sort of rescued the Bengals from the dead the other night, I thought the biggest play of the game was a T. Higgins play because it's been sitting there waiting to happen. They finally hit it right before the end of the half. It gives them some life because that offense stunk outside of about 3 plays after the opening drive of the game. They weren't bad. They stunk.
Well,
nobody wants to hear it. Nobody wants to talk about it. It's the truth. If you sat there and watched that game, their opening drive, they're lights out. They're running it. They're going down the field. The whole touchdown right out of the gate. 2 weeks in a row on the opening possession. Until that T. Higgins play before the end of the half, that offense stunk. And why did they stink? Because they couldn't run the ball, and all of a sudden all Miami had to do was worry about them passing the ball. So, to answer your question in a belligerent sort of way, and I'm sorry, is that you have to be able to run it a little, and it's what made the Bengals so good last year. Everybody talks about T and Jamar and Tyler, and rightfully so. But they had a running back that led the AFC in rushing last year, right? Wasn't he first in the AFC, third in the NFL?
I do believe so.
Okay.
He had 1,200 rushing yards and
They
300.
had the leading carrier in the AFC. Now, if all of a sudden Joe Burrow or Joe Mixon turns into a 700 or 800 yard back, I don't think that's good news for the rest of the offense.
I would agree with you.
And right now, he's not even on pace to do that.
Yeah, that's rough.
Thus, the offensive struggles.
Yeah, I mean, they should have their opportunities this week. Let me just give you the Ravens.
The Ravens are the worst pass defense in the league.
What
Which I know you
about
can't be
run
one-dimensional. I'm
defense?
just saying
What are
that's
they now again. We know Buffalo doesn't run the ball except for their quarterback, right? Haven't been able to run it at all. Miami was not going to run it because they fell behind 35-14. So you just throw the run game right out the window by halftime. So their other two games, if I'm not mistaken, were against New England and the Jets, correct?
Correct.
Okay, what are they giving up rushing yards per game?
Per game is 109.8, which ranks 14th in the league, but they're tied with a couple other teams there. So they're like average at best. And like we said, they played the Bills, can't really run the football, and yet the Bills were able to get 126 yards on them. That's kind of eye-opening, if you ask me. I mean, I think the issue is that they're just not dependable when it gets down in the fourth quarter.
Well, no doubt.
And, I mean, I don't know how the Patriots game unfolded. I would try to compare that one more than the Jets game just because we already know how the Jets are. They're not going to be great, but they're okay. The Patriots, however, they seem to be able to just run the football even when they know, like, Mac Jones is out or they know that Mac Jones isn't a very good passer deep down the field or – you know what I'm saying? Like, the Patriots have a good rushing attack. They got Stevenson back there. They've got another guy. I can't remember.
All right, here's the deal. The Patriots really ran the ball on them. They had Stevenson, who averaged 6 yards a carry, had a touchdown.
Oof.
Damian Harris averaged 4 yards a carry and a touchdown. And Mac Jones ran it 5 times for 31 yards and a touchdown. Mac Jones threw 3 interceptions in that game. So that was a 37-26 final. And at halftime, it was 14-13 Baltimore.
What was it?
14-13 Baltimore. Ravens outscored them. That game was in New England. Outscored them 23-13 in the second half. You go to the Jets game, 24-9, final. Lamar goes off in that game, big game, but the Jets did not run it at all. Now, Michael Carter, they were throwing the ball a lot. They threw it 59 times. So the run game was a non-factor. After the Ravens at the end of the third quarter went up, 24-3, they had 14-3 at halftime. So, every game's different. Every opponent is different. And this is going to be different because it's a divisional game. This is the first divisional game the Ravens have played this year, and they're at home, where they're 0-2. It's the Bengals' second divisional game. First one on the road. They lost to the Steelers the opening weekend. Nothing further to add from either one of you two?
I think this is the Mixon breakout game.
You do?
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do too. And I would say, I was just looking this up too. Lamar Jackson's game-winning drives, how many he's had in his career.
Yep.
He's had 8 total career winning drives and fourth quarter comebacks.
Yep.
And in those games, he had to run the ball. There's only one game against Indiana where he just threw all over the place. And I just don't see, like, if we keep it close and we manage to get a lead on them, I just don't see an opportunity for him to make a comeback without him being able to run the football. And we're really good at stopping him. So that's my key, is limiting their run. I think we can allow him to pass. Rashad Bateman's out, pretty sure. So, and even so, I think Awuzie would be able to handle him one-on-one. Honestly, he's so underrated this year, along with Eli Apple. But, yeah, I mean, I will say this. The one key thing about the Bengals that scares me is that we don't have DJ Reader. We had him against Baltimore both times last year.
He's a beast.
BJ Hill filled in valiantly, but he's no DJ Reader.
No, but Hill's a nice player. Alexandria. Love having women watching the show.
Yeah. That's my fiance.
Alexandria, invite all your friends, will you? Because the more and more, since we started this show, there are more and more women that are watching this show, and that we like. Alexandria says, I believe this has been the most competitive season of football so far, even when it comes to the bottom teams. She's spot on.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Spot on. You just never know. I mean, the best case in point is that Kansas City at Indy game. I don't know how anybody stops Kansas City. I know the Bengals did it in the second half twice last year. I just don't know how anybody stops that team.
Yeah, they stopped themselves, honestly.
That's right. I mean, they are so good. They're really good.
Except against the Bengals in the second half.
So, yeah, well, that's right. That's right, and give all the credit. You know, it's funny, when a couple of years ago when I was still doing NFL games, and that was the year the Bengals, their defense was terrible, and everybody wanted to run their defensive coordinator out of town, Anarumo, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, you could tell, though, being around this guy, and his confidence was clearly shaken. He came in the room, sat down with me and Chris Spielman. They're just getting killed. They don't even have any good play. I mean, let's face it. They didn't have many good players. And now that he has settled into that role, he's putting himself in a prime-time position to become a head coach.
Yeah, that scares me. That scares me a lot when you talk about Lou like that, because I think he's honestly what's been keeping the Bengals' Super Bowl potential alive.
Yep.
Well, he interviewed for that Giants job last year.
Yeah, and he was an assistant up there before he came to Cincinnati.
He's a great guy, quiet, just studious.
Intense, though.
Yeah.
Intense dude. You could see where he would get after people.
Yeah.
But he's got that room believing, and he's got good players.
Yeah, he's got decent players. He's done a very good job of picking the right system guys as well. Like, even our big names, like Jesse Bates and whatnot, but like Von Bell's really good. Eli Apple, who everyone gave up on, he's played really well in the system. All our linebackers that we drafted,
playing well. Pratt, Wilson, they play very well.
Yeah, they fill in, and I mean, like Marcus Bailey fills in when Pratt's hurt.
Yep.
You don't even notice that Pratt's gone. I mean, I will say we spent a lot of money on the defensive line, but it was worth it. Hendrickson's played well. Reeders played great. BJ Hill's played great.
It beats not spending money.
That's
right.
true.
Well, and Hendrickson, when he came in, the big narrative was, he just had all these coverage sacks in New Orleans when he led the league or whatever with 13 and a half, whatever it was, and then he comes in here and does it 1 year, almost sets a Bengals record. Then this year he's already got a few too.
They need one more, though. They need one more pass rusher.
Yeah, they need one more guy to step up.
And I don't know if that guy's out there on the street. Trades rarely ever happen in the NFL. Jason Pierre-Paul was on the street. We said at the time, we thought that would have been a nice pickup for the Bengals. That guy can still play. He played 55 snaps last week. He's a guy in his 30s now. He was signed last week, and he played 55 snaps without even practicing barely. That's how bad the Ravens needed him. And I'm sure when that game was over, he was in the ice tub, then the hot tub for probably about the next 48 hours.
Probably.
The guy's a gamer. All right. We got, you know what I want to do is before we get out of here, because normally we wait, the three of us wait until Thursday night to do this. But, you know, we've got a little, not grief, but about some of the games we're picking in college football, by the way.
Yeah.
And I want us to start maybe including some of our loyal viewers about some of the games that we are picking. Now, it should be noted, for those of you that don't know, it should be noted, right, that that we always pick the quote-unquote local teams. So we always have Ohio State, we always have UC, we always have Kentucky, and we have thrown in the Ohio University. But when it comes to some of these other games, I'd like some of you to weigh in. Just off the top of my head, number 8, Tennessee, at number 25, Brian Kelly, LSU.
Go Tigers.
Pretty good game.
Yeah.
Who would have thunk it? Number 17, TCU, undefeated, against number 19, Kansas. Who would have ever thought when the year began in the Big 12 that Oklahoma would not be ranked, Texas would not be ranked?
Oh, we knew
and
Texas.
That TCU and Kansas would be ranked.
Texas is not
5
back.
weeks into the season. What else? Nobody cares about the Pac-12.
Tom, you seeing this?
And even if some of our viewers care about the Pac-12, I'm in straight override mode there because I don't care about it. Do I see what?
Look up. The horn's down.
Horns
Texas.
down.
Yeah, believe me. It's a shame because it's one of the most incredible scenes in all of college football is when Oklahoma plays Texas, and they play at the state fairgrounds at the old Cotton Bowl. At least they used to. I don't know if they do anymore. But they play the game in Dallas.
Yeah.
And, boy, half red, half burnt orange, whatever they call that. They've been burnt orange for a long time now.
It's sad for college football.
It's sad for college football.
What was it, Sam Ellinger that said, we're back, when they beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl like 3-4 years ago, and then still haven't been back.
Although,
that Alabama game was impressive.
If the transfer from Ohio State, Quinn Ewers, a quarterback, he throws for 130 yards in the first quarter against Alabama. Borderline cheap shot. Has not been back since, talking about maybe being back for this game this week. They would be undefeated right now if Quinn Ewers was a quarterback, and they'd be ranked in the top 10 because of all the teams that have lost already. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, when we come back, cherry on top, tie a ribbon around this thing. Stick around for that.
At United Dairy Farmers, we've perfected freshness in our family bakery, where we use only the finest ingredients, like thick, high-quality glazes on our signature donuts, before delivering them fresh from bakery to store every day. UDF, made for you.
If your AC or furnace is struggling, turn to the experts at Bartell's Heating and Cooling. Their certified technicians get the job done right the first time, and if you need a new unit, Bartell's will give you upfront pricing with no hidden fees. Plus, ask about Bartell's 0% interest financing for 60 months. Learn more at bartellsheatingandcooling.com. Bartell's Heating and Cooling, for a comfortable way of life. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, proudly sponsoring high school football with 3 locations in Mason, Liberty Township, and Ross, Ohio. Our 10-foot screens guarantee a great view from every seat in the house. Eli's Sports Bar and Grill, the best place in Cincinnati for sports, food, and fun.
Where can you turn when you're in pain? Turn where more high school, college, and pro athletes turn. Where your neighbors and weekend warriors turn. Turn to Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine and get superior care on your schedule. That's the Beacon difference.
Check out our fresh arrivals at Jake Sweeney Used Cars. Over 250 used vehicles weekly. All makes, all models. From economy to luxury, Jake Sweeney, the original used car superstore.
All right, we talked about the home run by Aaron Judge last night to break the American League record, number 62. Let's start first with our cherry on top presented by UDF before we wrap this thing up. Now, walk me through this, Brandon.
So, obviously, a lot of fans been buying tickets in the outfield, left field to see if Aaron Judge is going to hit, 61, 62. I guess after 61 landed in the bullpen, the Toronto home bullpen for 61, a fan decided he was going to lay it all out there for 62 in case it landed either in the bullpen or in between, because a lot of stadiums now have the outfield wall and then a gap and then the stands. So he decides to go all in for $2 million and
check this out.
Doesn't care about the health of the legs or anything like that. And you can see him just drop, and the ball's caught, so he's there in case it ricochets, but no dice for him. Big risk, high reward.
This fan.
Freeze on this guy when we get to that point.
Yeah, I'll freeze it.
Because this story about this guy.
Talking about the guy that caught it?
His name's Corey Yeomans, I'm guessing. Okay, he caught the ball. Naturally going to hit the jackpot. It turns out this guy's from Dallas, works in the financial world, and is quite well-to-do. He's done very, very well for himself, right? And after the game, he had security personnel around him, took the ball to be authenticated, asked what he planned to do with it. He says, good question, haven't even thought about it yet. It's amazing because right after, a local TV station posted a brief interview with this guy, all of a sudden this woman says, this is my husband. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Her first name's Bree. She works in the local media, and she is an alum of ABC's The Bachelor. That guy's living right.
There he is.
He's got it figured out. What the hell are we doing?
We're sitting here in Hamilton.
Beautiful Hamilton, Ohio.
Beautiful Hamilton. I tell you, this town, every day I come here, I like it more and more. They got it going on in Hamilton. On the comeback.
I'll make Trace Fowler and Reed Mouse
Thanks
very
to
happy.
Chatterbox Sports. Big part of it. All right, that's going to do it today. Tomorrow, we're going to have Tracy Jones again.
Yay.
Got to figure out if I can get our buddy James Rapine to come on. Paul Doherty's on a little mini vacation, Paul and his wife, and so he's going to join us on Friday. So we'll have some good stuff tomorrow. If you have any feedback about what games you think we should pick, in the NFL, we pick all the AFC North teams. So, we got, I think, the Chargers at the Brownies, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. We have the Steelers taking on Buffalo, in Buffalo, I think. And then we have, of course, the Bengals and Ravens. So we need 2 or 3 other games on what we think we should pick.
We'll come up with some good ones, some primetime ones probably.
Okay. Casey, thank you. Brandon, thank you. Trace Fowler, our executive producer. Buckeyes this weekend. Is that underneath the logo there?
Here, hang on.
There you go.
There you go.
Michigan State. First road game.
Mighty Sparty.
Somebody on Twitter said I should have more Bengals guard. I don't have any Bengals guard.
We'll figure it out.
Send it in, send it in. I'm not buying.
We'll display it for you. We'll put it on the desk there. If you send it in.
All right. Adios. We'll see you tomorrow.